All right, Nick, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, happy to be here, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited. You got a lot of really cool things going on, checking out all your online stuff, some really cool projects. I always like to start back at the beginning, though. I believe you kind of grew up around this. I could be wrong, but I'd love to know, what was it like for 5-year-old Nick and what brought you to this point today?
No, I was always around it. So my father owned a fence company, and I actually went to work for him for about 11 years when I turned 11 years old, and was just, soaking in, being around work, wood shop, metal shop, putting fences in. I loved working, and at the time, 11, 12 years old, 13 years old, I liked making money, and knew I could work hard, and the harder I worked, the more money I would make. But even before that, I was always infatuated with carpentry. My father, while he owned a fence company, didn't really do a lot of carpentry hands-on. He was more of a businessman. But he'd always have the house being renovated, and when guys were over the house, I would rush home from work, and there was this carpenter, Mr. Bob Dennison, from Brockton, Massachusetts. Rest in peace, Bob. But he would come to the house, and he wore these white Carhartt overalls, and I bought a pair, and I would rush home from school, and I'd put them on, and I'd sit next to him and just like let him teach me and ask him a million questions. And there's a longer story to it, but he was so patient with me, and he would always tell me how much he hated kids, but I wasn't half bad. And before that, there was other contractors that worked at the house, and my mother tells me the story that one of them walked upstairs and said, "Hey, ma'am, can you please get your kid out of my way? He's driving me crazy." And they fired him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I just was infatuated by it, and long story short, growing up in my dad's business, and found the opportunity where it was a fence business. People kept asking if they built sheds. My dad kept saying no, and I was like, "Hey, this is an opportunity for me. I'll build you a shed." So then I started building sheds, and that turned into small remodeling projects, that turned into bigger remodeling projects. To At one point, I went to work for a commercial contractor doing high-rise construction for about 4 years, being in the project management side. And then I started doing the carpentry on the side again, to a point where I had to give up my quote unquote full-time job and go work for myself.
So when you started doing all these different jobs and growing, what were some mistakes that you made that at the time probably felt like the end of the world, but ended up being really good learning experiences? Can you remember any times like that?
I can remember a lot of times like that. How specific do you want to get? And like,
Well, anything that stands out to you, like something that maybe happened that you felt actually made you a better business person or a better carpenter or something along those lines, or a better leader. Um, for example, for myself, I was in a lawsuit for like 4 years, but I feel like that alone taught me a lot as a business owner and as a leader,
mm,
and also in terms of how to manage my mindset. And because
mhm.
so many things, that's just one part of it. You still got to live the rest of your life, right? So that was the biggest lesson. I learned a lot of lessons through that one experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some really difficult clients. Knock on wood, I've not been in a lawsuit. I get threatened that this one particular client will be taking me to court. And last year I got the letter reminding me that he would be doing it on Christmas Eve. So I'm expecting one here in a few days. But the one that sticks out in my head is from a carpentry perspective, and maybe, as a business owner, and it was this pergola. I told this story at the Builder Show a couple of years ago on stage, and it was very like I just like completely randomly riffed on this, but it was a pergola, and it curved around this patio, and they brought me to their neighbor's house, and they had this curved pergola, and they were like, "Look how, I love this. It's so beautiful. This is what we want." And I'm like, "No problem. Mine will be better than this." And I like, they was completely unnecessary. They weren't asking for anything better. They were just like, "Hey, this is what we want. Can you do it?" And I said, "Yes." And at the time, I was doing small projects. I've never done curved work. I had no idea how to do it, but I was like, I can figure this out. And it sounds so elementary to me right now, or to me now, but back then it was, I wanted to take the opportunity to buy pre-primed material so I didn't have to prime it. Like it was going to be outside. And it's funny, I actually have two pergola stories, and I guess I can tell the other one. But the prime material was finger jointed, and I had milled it down to 1/4 inch and bent it and glued it back together. And if you can imagine, finger jointed material that's milled down to 1/4 inch did not bend very well. And I busted my ass trying to get that thing to work, and I got it installed, and it looked beautiful, but like there's all these gaps on top, where then it was just like, when you screw something up and you just start chasing your tail trying to fix it, and you're just like bondoing it and trying to glue it and then put a clamp on it. It's like you're just trying to get it to look good, and where the reality is I should have just stopped and redone it. Well, that's basically what happened. And I went on to tell that story on stage at Builder Show, and I actually said that I committed on stage. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go home. I'm going to drive to that house, and if it's still standing in the backyard, I'm going to offer to replace it for free. And I did. I drove home, and and it took me forever to find that house because I couldn't find it. They end up painting the house different color. And I pulled in like around the corner, and it was gone. And I was like, of course it was gone. The thing probably blew up on them after the first winter, and they felt so bad for me because I was a kid and they just didn't call me. Interestingly, like real quick, there was another pergola I built out of PVC, and I laminated LVLs inside of it to support the span, and it completely blew up on me because I used the wrong PVC glue, and it just was like, it was a nightmare. And I went home, I researched the right glue, I ordered all the right glue, I ordered all new material, I built the entire thing in my garage brand new, and it looked, significantly better. And I called the client, I said, hey, I'm not happy with that product, I'm going to redo it. And they were like, what are you talking about? I showed up and I knocked that one down and built another one. And the reason I tell that story is that was really what got me to the point of like understanding that, I was always someone that said yes, even when I didn't know how to do it. And there's, in that first case, I didn't have the tenacity to realize my mistakes to the point where I should have went back and fixed it until obviously years later. But in the second case, it was very much, I committed to doing something that I didn't know how to do, and I failed, and I need to uphold my promise. And here's the opportunity for me to redo it and do it correctly. And I did. And that was what really like the beginning of this whole like rip it out mentality that I have been known for.
Yeah, that's amazing. What were the reaction of the people when you went back?
On the one that they ripped down? Or
yeah. Well, either one. So the one that you ripped down, did you go to their house? I don't know if you went back to that one.
I did. So the wood one that like blew up, I never saw them again. And this was, 10, 12 years ago today. Or maybe even it must have been even longer than that. But I think it was when I was in college. But the PVC one, I was also in, I think it was right after college. And their reaction was, I don't understand, why do you need to rip it down? And I brought them outside and I said, see all this, like, this is going to fail. The glue didn't set right. Like, it's just wrong. And they weren't happy, but I was like, I just don't feel comfortable walking away from it. And they understood. And, I've had other stories like that. We had even in NS Builders time, probably 3-4 years ago, we subbed out. We do all our own millwork, and on this particular job, it was a small kitchen. I sat down with Ken. I said, what if we sub out this job? And the reason I wanted to sub out the kitchen was it was a small 2-man shop, and I wanted to see if we could oversee and manage another shop to hit our level of detail, so we could then expand our ability to take on more work, right? So we had done it. The cabinetry got delivered. It got installed. It was just not to our standard. And we went there, we spent all day trying to like correct things and fix things and make things right. And at one point the client called me very upset with me, saying, I found out that you didn't build this cabinetry. I'm like, no, we did not. You know, we're working with a small shop. I explained why we outsourced it, like that we were trying to partner with them and growing our ability and our capacity. And it failed. And, you know, we're going to make it right. And he was like, what are you going to do to make it right? I said, I'm going to rip out the kitchen. And he's like, what are you talking about? The counters are in, you guys are about to tile backsplash. I'm like, I understand. I'm not tiling the backsplash, and I need to know when you're going to be gone for a week. And he said, well, we're going away in 2 months, you know, for a week. And he's like, but can you get it done in 7 days? I'm like, I promise you, when you get home, you'll have a brand new kitchen. And we set up a time lapse and we recorded it, and he left, and we went in there and ripped out the kitchen, $30,000 worth of cabinetry that I had bought from someone else, tossed it in the trash, and put in a brand new kitchen that we built. And I had the countertop company come that first day, move the countertops off the cabinets. We put the new cabinets in. They came back the next day. They set the cabinets. We were installing cabinets and doors and trim and everything else. And the tile guy showed up and tiled, and plumber came in, connect fixtures, electrician finalized their stuff. And on the last day, cleaners went in and cleaned it and delivered it. And it cost me $72,000, you know, like completely out the bottom line. And that was it. There was no, like, they were very happy. They were ecstatic that they got the product that they asked for. They didn't write us a bad review, but they didn't write us a good review. And, you know, I tell my team that, you know, I wasn't expecting anything except for a very neutral reaction, where it was more about what we let slide. And it was more about who we were as a builder. And if we were going to let that slide, why wouldn't we let the next thing slide? And then next thing you know, we're just this mediocre contractor, where it's like, no, we committed to doing something. We need to uphold this 100%. And we did. And, you know, the architect said, I don't know anyone that would have ever done that. I'm like, probably not a lot of people. And if they did, they probably wouldn't have recorded a video of it and talked about it online. And
it might have put some people out of business too, right? So how do you?
Yeah, and that's a question I get a lot. They're like, oh, it must be nice to be able to afford, like, you know, a $70,000 loss. I'm like, it's not that I could afford it. It's that I made it work. And, you know, in the case that, like, we were big enough where, you know, it wasn't an easy $70,000. I mean, by any means, it was a very difficult $70,000. And, you know, a lot of that you can look at, and maybe some of them are hard cost and some of them are, you know, the money that you lost out on in profit, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, at any round, like at any scale, you always have the ability to fix something. And if you can't afford to go in there and spend 70 grand replacing a kitchen that you screwed up in that very moment, okay, be upfront about that. Say, listen, I'm not happy with what the product I put out here, you know, and I would like the opportunity to make this right. I can't financially afford to do it in this very moment, but I would like the opportunity to replace this kitchen when I can't afford to do it.
In that case, you had hired a sub. Sorry, I'm curious about this conversation because I think this is super important for other contractors that are listening to it. And like, how do you handle a situation? Because these are things that I work with my team on too, is how do you manage? There's a lot of things at play here, right? There's the client expectations, there's the subcontractor relationships, there's the morale of the team, and all of these things are intertwined. Mm-hmm. And nobody likes to redo work, right? So that never feels good. And it might feel good when it's all done, but at the time it doesn't feel good. How did that work with the subcontractor? Because did they deliver what they were supposed to deliver, or did it just not work? Or like, how do you, I feel like some of that could have been done to them, but those are difficult conversations.
Very. Truthfully, I did not go back to that contractor. I did not ask for anything. Could I have? Yeah, I think in all legal matter, I could have, but I knew it would be challenging in the sense that there would be this force to replace what I had issues with. Where the reality is, he could have replaced the things that we had issues with. He could have fixed a bunch of things, and ultimately, the product would have been okay, and the client probably would have been fine with it, but we weren't, and my team wasn't. And my team said, and I looked at Ken in that moment when we were on site, and I said, is there anything that we could do with what we are standing in front of that you can consciously walk away and say, I'm proud of this? And without hesitation, he said no. And I said, then we are replacing it. And I made that call right there. What I did do is I drafted an email to the cabinet maker, a lengthy email, and I explained my frustration, but I took ownership of it. I said, I wasn't clear with my expectations. We should have been more involved with overseeing fabrication. We should have and then I outlined the things that I had issues with. And it was a long list. And it was everything from, poor material selection to poor finish quality to, stickers that were inside of every single cabinet that we couldn't get off without Goo Gone. Like, it was just like a long list of things. And in the closing, I said, I hope that I'm not asking you for any money back. I'm not asking you to come fix them. I'm not asking you to come pick them up or take them out. All I'm doing is I'm sharing this with you because I think that that you delivered a product that was subpar. And unfortunately, at this time, I don't think that you would ever be able to deliver a product that we would be okay with. And I'm not comfortable taking another risk on it. So take this information for what you will. It's not a shot at you. It's simply truth. It's designed to be an informative email. And he responded days later. He was like, I don't even know how to respond to this. Like, I'm so sorry. I wish I could make this right. And I just, I didn't want to go down the road. I didn't want to go down the road of trying to fix it because I've already committed to the fact that it's not something we'll ever be proud of. And we're going to do this ourselves because that's what we promised to do in the beginning and we should have done from the start.
Hmm.
As far as everyone else involved, the client expectations, I had, I explained to them that we would get it done in 7 days and that we were going to do everything to do that. And we had to get that done. Like, that we did not have an opportunity to screw that up. As far as like the countertop subcontractor, like, am I paying him to come in and, remove the counters and put them back? I don't think I did. And I think that was twofold in the sense that I have a great relationship with them. I explained to everyone knew what we were doing. Like, hey, this is a huge hit on us. Just so you know, like, if there's anything you can do to be helpful, would appreciate it. Like, my plumber was like, no problem. We're down the street. Just let us know when you need to take that faucet off and we'll come back and hook it back up. Don't worry about it. So we have a great relationship with them. The countertop fabricator was very similar. I actually think that they had damaged the original kitchen to begin with, so they felt bad and then felt like they owed us. But regardless, like, even if they didn't, they would have. We had a great relationship with them, and they said the same thing. No problem. We'll make this work for you. Electrician was the same way. It was really my team, the time that we were investing in doing it, and then the tile guy we were going to pay anyway because he hadn't installed the backsplash. The cleaners we had to pay anyway because they were coming to clean the job. Yeah. But like you said a moment ago, it was setting the expectation with the client and the entire team, before we went in there and it just went for it. If I just called the plumber and had him like, hey, I need this faucet removed and then replaced, it would have been like, yeah, no problem, $750. It's like, hey, let me just set the stage for you for a moment. This is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. Yeah. Not asking for a freebie, but would appreciate any help that you can give me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a tough situation, but I'm sure you're glad with how everything worked out, and it's another experience and story. Move on, and I always tell people I've lost way more money in business than I would have ever paid going to school.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah.
you just learn from that and you continue moving forward and don't make the same mistake again.
Yeah.
I
I
want to
mean,
go back. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I could probably fill your entire podcast with stories that I've learned from. So
Yeah. I want to go back a little bit. It wasn't on my list of questions here, but it popped into mind when you were talking about Bob, who you learned from,
mhm.
and it sounded like his soft skills were not really there, or
They were with me.
yeah. And I would say that the carpenters that I learned from were great carpenters, but some of them, same thing. Soft skills weren't there, rough around the edges. If I spoke to my employees the way they spoke to me, there would probably be some big problems, sort of thing. But for me, it didn't really matter. I had a piece of wood hucked at me one time, chucked at me. Luckily, I caught it. Those types of things. I didn't hold anything against anybody, but those are kind of like the way that I had learned growing up and doing my apprenticeship 20 years ago is different than the way it's done now. How important do you think soft skills are now? And have you seen a big change from the way you were taught to the way teaching is being done now?
Imagine if I said no to that. Yeah, I mean, of
Then
course,
I
right?
would say, how is that going for you?
Yeah, how's that going for you, man? Of course, man. I think that, I mean, gosh, I feel like you might be setting me up here, but there's so much to unpack there where, there's no question that the world is so much more sensitive. And I think a large part of that is because there's so much information being thrown at us, and it's so easy to obtain information, both primarily false, and of course mixed in with truth, right? But it creates these almost false feeling of animosity towards things. But my point is like, it's made the world a more sensitive place. People are more sensitive to sensitive in both directions to feelings. It's like when you're offending someone, it's a bigger issue. Growing up, like it was, dude, you got to have thick skin in this game. It's like that's not as relevant anymore. So and do I think that's an issue? Yes, I do. I think that there is almost too much focus on how information is being delivered to someone to make sure that you're doing it in a way that doesn't offend someone. But do I think that you should deliver information in a way that offends someone? No. Like, no,
Yeah,
of course
I
not.
think there's a difference between like being disrespectful
Mhm.
and deliberately hurting, saying something that would affect them versus them just interpreting something that you said
Exactly.
feel a certain way.
And that is the difficult part where, trust me, there's times where, I'm in a meeting or I'm meeting with someone like my team or a trade partner or someone that just pisses me off. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be an asshole today. I'm just going to tell them like it is. I'm like no filter. And I'm just going to, and then I go in, I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I had my mind. I can't ask someone how old they are. Like that's against the rules when you're when you're hiring someone. I got yelled at for that years ago. It's like you can't do that. Can't ask how old they are. I'm like, I wasn't judging my hiring on them. I was just curious. Like they made a comment and I was like, oh, are they my age? Are they younger? Like, but the point being is that, yeah, I mean, you don't want to be disrespectful, but there's times where, like shit's just not right. Like it's something goes wrong and there's going to be emotion with it. And when that emotion comes out, whether it might be a little abrasive, and that's got to be okay. It's in my opinion. But yeah, I think that there's a heavy focus on the HR side of our business now, and way more so than there ever was. And it's still super relevant when you talk to the older generation in our trades, where it's, my dad's still in business and, he says stuff and guys his age own businesses and they say stuff. And I'm like, man, I could never say that. But and at this and there's that whole sense of like they're on their end of their career and they don't give a crap, like whatever, no big deal. Like what are they gonna do, sue me? I'm like, I mean, I have no idea. But I know that I'm not gonna say that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely tricky, right? And it adds another layer. And I think that it definitely takes, as a leader, whether that's you leading your business or other leaders, because you'll have other people within your business that are leaders as well, is you need to be able to know when you can kind of step up and say things that uh, could be offensive. But I think there's also a time, I think at this point I'm talking about team, right? It's different when you're dealing with a client. But when you're dealing with a team, like sometimes people just need to hear the truth, right? And hear it as it is.
Yeah.
And that could come off as hurting their feelings, but sometimes you got to create a little bit of pain for them to make change.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And I think that it's just more strategic. My wife's, her training, she has her master's in clinical psychology. And I remember when she left to do her schooling years ago, I'm like, I never need to know that stuff, not important. I'm like, that's all I do now. Right. So
Right.
that's all it is. So she's my secret weapon. So on that note, one of the things that you talk about is thought leadership.
Yeah.
So how would you define thought leadership, and how do you bring this into your business?
So I've always thought about thought leadership in the sense like collaboration over competition, where it's we talk about just a moment ago, like we're talking about information and how there's so much information being shared. Social media is a big part of that. YouTube, Google, like the internet, these are all things that you can literally learn anything you want on the internet. And when I started realizing that, I realized, because I'm looking up stuff, I'm trying to find out how to do things, and then people started sharing process. I'm going to just speak specifically, right? So someone had shared specifically on how to install cedar shingles on the sidewall without having a nail going through the face when you put the batten up. And they use this piece of sheet metal that tucks up behind the shingles, and you staple it. And then when you're done, you just knock it out. And then that staple lives behind the shingle, and you never have a hole through the cedar shingle. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so smart. And I'm working on my house, and I shared this on social media, and I got roasted. This guy was like, dude, why are you sharing that? Like, you wrote a whole article on it. Like, that's a trade secret. And I'm like, what? I'm like, this information exists beyond me. And,
Yeah.
And ultimately, like he was fine with it, but it really like sent me down this road of, I'm not the first one to do this. Like, I'm not spilling the one spilling secrets. And I really started encouraging and sharing everything I was doing, like every piece of it, where ultimately I realized that people are going to ask me a question. And if I don't tell them the answer, that's okay. But they're going to turn around and go ask someone else. And the person that gives them the answer is now the most valuable person to them. And when they have another question, they're not going to start with me again. They're not going to say, hey, Nick, do you have the answer to this? They're going to go to the guy that gave them the answer the first time. And that puts them in a thought leadership perspective, in a position where it's like they are the person sharing the information. So my approach with social media and content was, let's just be a thought leader. Let's be the person that's constantly investing time and education into learning things and share it. Live learning, as I've called it. Like, as I learn it, I'm going to turn around. I'm going to face you. You're going to tell me something. I'm going to turn around. I'm going to go on camera, and I'm going to talk about what I'm learning right now, and do it live. And when I'm wrong, have an entire force of YouTube comments tell me I'm wrong, and I can do my due diligence and find out if they're accurate, and I'll do a sorry video, or realize that no, they're just they're just giving me crap because I wear funny jeans.
Yeah.
Like,
and they're not even coming at you with real names. They're hiding
right.
behind something.
and so that has always been my approach. And I've told this story before, but I spoke in Detroit about this, and the CEO of Bloom from the hinge manufacturer came up to me. He said, I loved what you talked about, but why would you share all this? Why would you like what? How could and he said, how could we share the secret sauce to our hinges? And I said to him, I'm like, wouldn't it be interesting? Wouldn't you feel better if you knew that Grass, another hinge manufacturer, right, had your blueprints and you knew that they were then going to take them and be developing a product to compete with you? If you knew they were doing that, compared to not knowing if they have bought the hinge and they're in the shop dissecting it and trying to figure out why it's so cool and then developing it, and have no understanding of like what time frame they might be coming out with a competitive product. And furthermore, you give them the blueprint. Like, here you go. Here's our best-selling hinge. Here's the blueprint for it. Here's the material we use. Go for it. Make another product. That now forces you to turn around with your team and be like, all right, guys, they're going to be hot on our tails in about 3 months. Let's develop the next best thing. And it pushes us to innovate. And that's the same thing we feel is that, you know, if we're going to share stuff, you know, yeah, there's times where I see someone else post something we did, like a cool detail. I'm like, man, you know, it was really cool when we did it, but now everyone's doing it. And it's like,
Right.
but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but wait till they see what we're doing next. Like wait till and when they did put that detail together, they reached out to us. They said, hey, how did you do that? Like, no problem. Here's a video, or here's how I did it. Here's a product. Here's a link. And it forces us to be innovative. It forces us to be constantly evolving. And it continues to keep us in the spot where we're the one with the information, and we will share it with the people that ask.
Yeah. And I think what it also does is it promotes a growth mindset as opposed to a fear-based mindset, right?
Right.
And a lack mindset where you think that there's not enough work
Mhm.
for everyone, or there's not enough ideas, or there's not enough creativity or something like that.
Right.
Because in reality, there's more than enough for everybody. The other thing
Right.
I've realized too is that there's a difference between, you know, knowledge and action. Knowledge is not power. The power is actually in the action. Just because somebody knows the secret doesn't mean they're actually going to do anything with it.
Exactly.
There's a lot of people who know stuff who are very smart, but can't fight their way out of a paper bag.
Or
Sort of
just
thing,
or
right?
just or just don't want to.
Yeah,
You know, like you sign up for the gym doesn't mean you're going to go to the gym.
yeah,
You could be paying $200 a month for that gym. Doesn't mean you're going to go.
yeah. And there's lots of secrets on how to get ripped, but
Right.
not everyone does them.
Exactly.
Very few people do. So yeah, I love that. That's a great way to think, and a great way to keep yourself on your toes. And, you know, it's one of the reasons I love having these conversations, is because I always learn something, and we continue to put stuff out there too, because we want other people to build better, right? We want
Right.
more. We want to make sure that, you know, people aren't just building the worst possible houses allowed by law,
Right.
right? We
Right.
want to make sure that they're building healthy homes and that they're actually building an environment that's going to promote health for their families, as opposed to just making them more and more sick. And we've been running into stuff here. It's funny because I'm in Mexico right now and looking at houses and figuring out what's going on down here. And there's a lot of, I had somebody send me and a friend that's down here. He goes, oh, here's this builder I just came across, and they're using bamboo in their buildings. You know, what do you think? They're, you know, kind of promoting green. And I'm like, just because they're using bamboo doesn't mean anything. As far as every home I've walked into, it's a concrete wall with crappy windows and no ventilation, like no mechanical ventilation, no air sealing, no insulation. They're all built the same. Some of them just look nicer than the others. They all
Yep.
have mold issues.
Right.
So you bring me a house that kind of starts to address this other stuff, then I'll be super impressed. But
Right.
until then, it's just pretty pictures sort of thing, right? So I'm hoping that we can, you know, I found out about a build that's going on not too far from here, and apparently they're doing some things that are different. So I'm gonna go
Cool.
go check it out. But
That's awesome.
there's tons of opportunity no matter where you go, that's for sure, and no matter how much you share. So speaking on that, you know, you were talking about creativity, and creativity is super important to you, from what I understand, in everything that you do. So how do you keep that creative mindset going? What are you doing? And is this something that you're promoting throughout your entire team to make sure your entire
Yeah.
team is creative?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I alluded to off camera here is that we are doing our year end reviews, and creativity is one of the last things I mentioned in that year end review as something that I need to do a better job defining. Because oftentimes, and what I'm getting as feedback is that they're thinking that creativity is the micro details that I pay attention to, the way the baseboard dies into the floor or the stairs, how the shadow ends up when, the light hits it just right. Like, yeah, that those are details, but that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about creativity. Creativity is what is, um, the product of constraint. And for us, we talk about in construction, you talk about quality and price and schedule, and you can only pick two. And I've challenged that recently and saying, no, it's not it's not that you can only pick two. It's that you need to organize them in the correct fashion. And for us, quality will always be number one. That's just, we're not going to sacrifice that. That is our number one. That's our North Star. And after that, we need to decide what's more important. Is it schedule or is it budget? And we need to decide which one is going to trump the other. So then the oftentimes our constraint is schedule and budget, right? Because quality never changes. So if our constraints are time and money, or schedule and budget, we need to understand how we're creative with them. How do we make the dollar go further? How do we get the project done faster? And in the conversations I have with my team, it's I want everything questioned. I want us to think about everything. I want us to think about, the way we accomplish things. And today, in my millwork company, I was chatting with both my cabinet maker and installer about this, and it's like I want these ideas to come out of like left field. I want them to be wild, and I gave an example today where I was like, I want you to be looking at a set of drawings and come to the table and be like, imagine if we handmade that hinge out of 24 karat gold, because when that door's open and the clients in there getting a bottle of wine, like how cool that would be. It's like, yeah, I mean, is the reality that we're going to do that? No, but what that just did is open this like creative mindset of thinking of a different way to accomplish that. Now flip that to that's the level of creativity or the cool stuff, but like think about it from a schedule standpoint. And this is something I battle with in construction. It's like, hey, we got to build this house in 18 months. It's like, nah, we can't do that. What do you mean we can't? What do you mean we can't build a house in 18 months? Of course we can. Well, no, we just well, why? Well, we don't have enough manpower. Okay, so let's get more manpower. It's like, well, we don't have enough money in the budget. It's like, well, how much money do we need? Well, I don't. Well, it's not that. It's that crew doesn't have enough people on their staff. It's like, oh, okay, let's hire two crews. And it's you keep asking the question. It's like the reality is like, oh wait, we can build it in 18 months. It just takes a certain level of thinking. And I made a reference recently about Sanibel Island with the hurricane and how the bridge collapsed. And that bridge took years to build, and then they were estimating months to fix it. And the Army Corps came in and fixed it in 7 days. And they fixed it in 7 days because they wanted to. Yeah, if I tell you, hey, you have a paper due in 2 weeks, if you're like me, you're going to write it the night before. You're not going to spread it out over 2 weeks.
Yeah, that sounds
So
like you
yeah, and it's like, but okay, hey, you have a paper due tomorrow. That constraint makes you approach that differently. And that's the way I look at creativity is like, what is the constraint and what is the challenge? And if the challenge is I need to build this house in 18 months, what are the things I need to do in order to do that? I made a reference to the Encore Hotel here in Boston, and they built that in I don't under 2 years. It was like under 2 years. And I went there, and my wife and I stayed, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm looking around the room," and I'm like, "The quality in this place is unbelievable, like unbelievable." I'm like, I think the doors I think the doors and all the casing was manufactured in a shop and sprayed in a spray booth, and they came out in like pieces. And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "No, this is what I'm trying to teach my team. It's like, think about it in a different way. They could have had trim carpenters on that hotel for 2 years, trimming out doors, installing doors, making sure that they were done right, filling them, sanding them, spraying them. But they didn't. They looked at that as a potential cause of delay. And here's an opportunity. Let's manufacture them in a shop. Let's order them 2 years in advance and stack them up and be ready for install once that drywall is on the wall. And so when I think about creativity and communicating to my team, that's what I'm talking about. How do you reconsider how to accomplish something rather than just looking at the easiest or the simplest solution? Challenge yourself to find a better solution, whether that nets you a faster result, a less expensive result, or just simply a cooler result.
Yeah, anything's possible. And yeah, with the right creativity, it's so true. There's a building I was brought to here. It's called the Azulik Umay. And when I say here, in Mexico, it's close to Playa del Carmen, closer to Tulum. Town's called Umay. This building is wild. It's curves. I got the story. If you're ever in the area, let me know. I'll bring you a tour there. But this building was built in 9 months, had 1,000 workers on site every single day, and there was no plans. And when you see this building, you'll understand why there was no plans, because everything's curved and it's like uses all roots that are local to the area. Like they use roots and concrete and basically rebar, and they created all these curved structures, and then they formed the concrete around it. And they created part of the floor is concrete, part of it is like these roots that grow locally, and then they have this wooden structure. It's not efficient by any means in terms of a efficient building or anything, but then they have this like local resin that I think helps makes this like fiberglass material that coated the entire outside of it. It's just a mind-blowing building for people who understand what it takes to build stuff like that. It's absolutely wild, but it's another example of like it's an artist, right? It's an artist getting creative and figuring out how to make it happen and just making it happen, right? So I love that you're doing that within your team.
And it's funny, I was like pitching this to my team, and I was like, "And have you guys seen the show?" And they were like, "Extreme Home Makeover," and I was like, "Exactly." And they're like, "Nick, those houses are pieces of crap." I'm like, "No, I get it, but the point is they still got it done." There's a whole crew that comes in for like 2 months after that, fixing everything. We know about that. Like everyone knows. Maybe not everyone. Now everyone knows, right? Because everyone listens to the podcast. But the point is they still came in and put that stuff together in 7 days or whatever it is. That's still a feat, regardless of the end result and the quality. Like there's ways to accomplish this. And oftentimes it's like, well, it's money. It's like, is it money though? Like if we're still like, if we know it takes 100 man or 1,000 man hours to do something, it's more money if we take the same amount of people and do it in 1,000 man hours, because they're going to be working overtime. But if we double the amount of people and everyone works regular hours and you still accomplish it in 1,000 man hours, isn't that the same? It's the same dollars. You're not spending time and a half. You're not working people to the bone. You are accomplishing exactly what you set out to do with more people. Mm-hmm. And so that is the most difficult thing to challenge. And it's interesting timing, because a local builder who he posted yesterday, and he's got this project, and he posted that he was going to complete the house in 10 months. And that's extremely fast for things around here. Like everyone's like minimum a year. Like, and it's not a small house. It's I think it's over 5,000 square feet. And that's a feat. And he posted it up, and he's at top of foundation right now. He's like, and we're getting this done in 10 months. I'm like, dude, you just put yourself on blast. Everyone is going to watch this build now. Yeah. And I shared it with my team. I'm like, look at this, guys. And not in the sense like, hey, if they can do it, we can do it too. But it's like, it's possible. What are we doing that's preventing us from getting it done? Is it planning? Is it what is it?
And this is where it gets tricky, and where, good leaders like yourself are so important, because what you're doing is challenging people's belief system, right? They have a belief, and what you're doing is to, in a sense, breaking down the walls to that belief. So in one sense, making them wrong. And it's hard to admit when we're wrong or when we were believing something that wasn't true, because, well, our brain just doesn't want to do that.
Right.
As humans. So
It's yeah,
yeah.
it's
But
true.
then when people break through, then it's like, oh my God, like hallelujah, right?
Right.
Thank you. There's so many things I've done in my life where I had different beliefs, and I'm like, well, that was wrong. Shouldn't have believed that, right? So
Yeah.
it's like
And
that saying, right? Don't
it's
believe
the
what you believe, what you
it's the
think.
desire, right? Like I said about Sandoval, the bridge. It's like they wanted to get it done, so they got it done. Like there's ways to accomplish things in any way, in any shape or form. It's like you watch these time lapse videos of bridges being replaced in 48 hours. It's like it can be done,
Mhm.
and there's proof. It's just a matter of wanting to get it done.
Yeah. And then there's, I think on that front too, there where it shifts to is that there's more upfront work, right? There's more planning on whatever that project is
Maybe, yeah.
you're taking the work off of the site, you're doing it off site, but you're also pre-planning, because those are things that we're focusing on now too, is
Mhm.
more on the pre-planning stuff, so that when we hit the ground running, we're not figuring out stuff, which is, as you can probably understand, it's definitely difficult in the residential world, especially if you're getting into renovations, because you don't know absolutely everything that's going to happen, and clients change their mind and all sorts of things happen and yada yada yada.
Right.
But so you don't know what you don't know, but there are the known unknowns, the potentials, right? And I think it's that's where we can make a big difference in what we're focusing on here at our business too. Now, that being said, I'm curious, do you follow a lot of technology in the industry? Are you in touch with what's going on? Because I
Um,
always like to ask the question about, do you see anything that's potentially going to disrupt the industry, or anything that you've been keeping an eye on?
I I think offsite construction is something that uh, offsite construction, CLT, mass timber, panelization. Um, I think that, I think it's already disrupting the industry. And I think that, it's only getting better. People like Benson Wood, Ted, Unity Homes, he's got the panelization company, like they're just consistently getting better and better. And their products are, they're coming in completely panelized, windows installed, standing up in a matter of 4 or 5 days, and you have a passive level home. And there's so many benefits to offsite construction. Yes, it goes back to the pre-planning, but I think that's going. I mean, we have there's so many avenues I can go with this, but like thinking about the reduction in craftsmen and our labor force, it's like, right, well, we need something that's going to counteract that. Yes, we need to put training in place. Yes, we need to get people interested in trades. Yes, we need people to want to work in this trade, but we're too late. Like we can't just continue to build the way we build, because we're not going to have the people in order to do that. So simultaneously, we need to be supporting technology and things like offsite construction, where these panels can be built by a robot.
Mhm.
It's like, well, that takes the craftsmanship out of the trade. It's like, does it? Or does it change who the craftsman is? Does it change where that craftsmanship lies? What about the guy designing the panel? Spending time figuring out how to use 40% less lumber in a wall, figuring out how to build that panel that a computer would be able to put together. But when it shows up on a site, someone can look at it and say, I understand what that is and how to put that together, and then deliver a product that is less material, less waste, higher performance, longer lifespan, and affordable for the client. It's like where's the downfall? Well, the craftsmanship. It's like, okay, well, that carpenter that would have had to frame the house and then eventually do the interior trim, now he gets to do the interior trim. Now that's what he gets to focus on. The fun stuff, or in my opinion, the stuff that is, the sexy stuff. It's like, well, the guy likes, the framers. It's like, I understand the framers are always going to be there. Like, and their scope might change. It's not ever going to be 100% offsite construction, but as it moves to that, and those framers are framing less stick frame homes, Well, now they're hopping on site and putting these panels together, putting these complex roof systems that, yeah, they were cut on a computer, but they still need to be put together in a way that makes sense. Those guys need to do that. And their job becomes safer because now they're on the ground putting this stuff together, using a crane to lift it up. So I think that offsite construction and the pre-construction side of residential, because commercial is already doing a lot of this, you're going to start seeing residential adapting it really quickly. And 10 years ago, when I was in commercial, I was doing a 180 unit high rise, and everything came in like pre-done. The electrical for the entire unit would show up in a box, pre-wired, completely pre-wired.
What do you mean pre-wired?
I'm talking. I mean, all the Romex was cut to length with termination things on either end, and it was like a wiring harness for a car. And they pulled one end to the panel, and then everything else they just pulled one at a time right to the box, already pre-cut. Because they could do it, because they had the technology to figure out, like, all right, what do we need 17 and a half feet for a piece of Romex for circuit 17. And they would pull that out, cut 17 and a half feet. They put I forget what they're called, but like the particular outlets we had, there was no screws in the side of the outlets. It was a plastic clip that clipped in the back of the receptacle, and you were completely terminated. And it came in like a wiring harness.
So do you even need an electrician to run the wires? You just
Of course.
run the wires.
No, you of course you still need the electrician, and it also a union job. But plumbing, every floor, all the shower stacks, they were pre-made. Like they were just stacked up on carts, and you'd take one, you bring it over, and you connect it to the floor below. You'd make that connection, and then you'd add a second piece that would push it to the next floor. But the point is like, they looked at every opportunity, like, what can I do offsite to make my job faster?
Yeah.
How much stuff can I make offsite? And as I'm saying this out loud, like the reality is, we have been doing this forever. It's like you think about precast panels. Well, at one point we were casting everything in place. You think about bricks. It's like bricks are now manufactured in a facility. At one point we were making those bricks on site.
Mm-hmm.
Think about lumber. At one point we were cutting trees down and running it through a sawmill, using it for the forms for the foundation, and then flipping it and putting it up on the roof. Now that stuff gets shipped from a lumberyard, and it's in sheet goods, and the forms are used 1,000 times. We have been adapting this, and we're not paying. A lot of people, I think, in this industry are not paying attention to the fact that this has always been done. This has always been the way. We continue to innovate and make our process easier. So we're not taking the craftsmanship out of building these homes. We're shifting the craftsmanship. And I would argue, going back to something I said earlier about collaborating over competing, it's like, this isn't new. Us sharing all this information in a collaborative way on social media is not new. It is only more relevant because the amount of media that we consume is heightened. This old house has been around for 41, 42 years. The whole premise of that show is to share how to do things. 42 years. No one ever said, maybe 42 years ago, but no, in the 35 years I've been alive, no one's ever said, man, I hate how this old house gives away all the secrets.
Yeah. I didn't realize that show had been around that long.
Yeah. But that's the point. It's like, this isn't new. It's just new to you because you have the ability to consume so much now. It's the same thing with technology. It's like, this is not new. This is we're simply shifting what we call, quote unquote, craftsmanship. And we're not getting wrapped up in the nostalgia of cutting the tree down and turning it into sheathing.
Well, Nick, this has been great. You're a wealth of information and knowledge, and somewhat of a philosopher in the construction world, I would say.
Oh man, I don't know about that. I feel like I got a little deep there, but that's good.
no, that's exactly where I like to go with this, right? So I love it. So thank you for opening up and sharing all that. Uh, I want to ask before you share all of your socials and
Oh, sure.
all those fun links, any parting words of advice for our listeners out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that focusing on, like, I can say this in a couple different ways, but when I talk about focusing on quality or the rip it out mentality, or talking about those stories that we went back and took something out, be true to what you're actually trying to accomplish. You know, if you're going to sell something, sell it, and then deliver it. You know, actually deliver what you're selling. And if ultimately you fail at doing it, be honest with yourself and be honest with the client, and, you know, take the risk in going back and redoing it, and offering to make it right. Because, you know, despite the outcome, whether it's neutral or beneficial, you know, it's always cool to do the right thing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick. How do people get a hold of you, or where do you want them to go? I know you have a very popular Instagram channel and YouTube channel.
Yeah, I mean, you can find us, NS Builders, on all the platforms, nsbuilders.com. You can get in touch with me personally at nickschiffer.com. That's SCHIFFER. And yeah, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the channels.
TikTok, I haven't really started doing much with that yet, but I got to start getting on it.
Yeah, for now, we're just repurposing some content over there just to have a presence. So
Yeah. Nice. Well, thanks again, Nick. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a lot on your plate, especially as we're at the time of this recording anyways. Holidays are coming up, so always busy time.
yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. It was awesome.